Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Waldman. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Friday, finally, in this week full of Fridays. Friday, June 22nd, 2018. It seems like every day has been a Friday, or we've wanted to say at least it was Friday. Each day, every time it happened. But we're finally here. Not that Fridays or Saturdays or Sundays make any difference in this particular administration. There's no relief over the weekend, and, well, there oughtn't to be any for anybody anyway. We're still in the crisis mode. And, by the way, still no answer to where the girls are. Where are the girls? Hashtag continues and has to continue unabated, I guess, because have you seen anything? I haven't. I still don't know where the girls are being kept, and it's, at this point, beyond bad joke time. And I don't know if we're ever going to get an answer. And I think maybe they're counting on our outrage burning us out before they ever have to give an answer. I really have no idea. Yesterday and this early morning really kind of verified it all for a lot of people. Yesterday, the end of yesterday's show was particularly odd, I thought. And I was unsure how the last hour or so of the show came across, and I didn't hear too much about it, although Armando seemed to like it a great deal. We have a real problem in this country, and it all starts from the fact that the president appears to be so mentally unbalanced that we have, we really have a fairly serious national security problem on our hands. We've known it for some time. Well, in one sense, I guess it's not as worrisome. In the olden days, if the Russians were to find out that our president was totally mentally unstable, any number of things could happen, any number of ways they could take advantage of this. But of course, in this case, they are fully aware that the president is mentally unstable. They contribute to his mental instability, and they installed him in the presidency because of it. And so I guess, at the very least, it's on the upside. The silver lining here is there isn't a hostile Russia that suddenly finds out that the president of the United States is mentally unstable and rushes to take advantage of it in the moment. It can be a slow drip instead. Isn't that fantastic? That's what it's not a silver lining at all, of course. It's still horrible news. Republicans, I guess, have increasing reason to be angry with the president as well. The Republicans in Congress have, at this point, I'm sure, gotten whiplash trying to follow the president that they've been begging to lead them in the immigration debacle, I guess. And I don't know how to exactly sum this up, I guess, although, Kyle Griffin, I guess, we'll turn to Kyle Griffin, as the world does turn to Kyle Griffin for one explanation of what's going on. That there are, he says, he includes pictures of tweets from the president 3 days apart. But, that's an eternity in Trump's world, on the Trump planet, which spins at, 100 bazillion miles an hour, although ours spins pretty fast too. But, the point is, a day is about an hour long for Donald Trump. And, that's just his mental metabolism, let's say, is on a different pace than the rest of us. That's the most charitable way of saying it. So 3 days ago, he tweets with the stupid hashtag, change the laws. Of course, we think we should change the people making the laws, but okay, change the laws. Now is the best opportunity ever. Now, the best opportunity ever. I'm never going to be able to get through anything. Now is the best opportunity ever. Again, like Mr. Braggart, everything is the best ever. It's not an opportunity at all. It's perhaps one of the worst. But because he's here, it's the best ever. Now's the best opportunity ever for Congress to change the ridiculous and obsolete laws on immigration. Get it done, whatever it is. Always keeping in mind that we must have strong border security. Right. Okay. Keeping in mind. Who cares what you keep in mind? Your mind is a sieve. The best opportunity ever? Well, I mean, maybe it is, but my guess is that at some point in the past when they passed an immigration law successfully, that would have been at least one better opportunity because this Congress can't pass any of them. None of the ideas. I mean, that's the update on it. Nothing passed in their big fight. Now, 3 days later, that would be this morning, his tweet is, Republicans should stop wasting their time on immigration until after we elect more senators and congressmen / women in November. That's how it reads. Dems are just playing games, have no intention of doing anything that solves this decade's old problem. We can pass great legislation after the red wave, which of course is not happening and no one's talking about. And if anything, there's a blue wave being talked about, not the red one. But whatever, he just will brag on it. So what's happening? What's going on? I don't know. I'll have to share some other tweets with you, I guess. The other one that caught my attention this morning, Rachel Bade. Rachel Bade is a congressional reporter for Politico who writes, House Republicans can't trust a thing this guy says. And she's talking about the 400-pound guy on the bed, Donald Trump. Goodlatte told conference yesterday, remember Bob Goodlatte, who had he had the extremist immigration bill that was supposedly compromising with the merely right-wing Republican immigration bill. That was the big compromise. The right wing and the extreme right wing were compromising. And they didn't, and they couldn't pass anything. So Goodlatte told the Republican conference yesterday, and that's in caps, yesterday, that Trump told him to tell them to pass the compromise bill. What a total disaster, because she is retweeting herself here. This tweet is included, which she begins with 3 exclamation marks all by themselves, and then says, we have gone from I'm with you 1,000%, and I will not leave you in the wilderness. I guess 2 quotes from Trump's meeting with the House Republicans. With you 1,000%, and I will not leave you in the wilderness, to this. It is now, of course, she points to this morning's tweet. Republicans should stop wasting their time on immigration. He's it's like this unbelievable, process of a series of events, except, from Trump, it is now quite believable, obviously, that he goes to them and they beg him to take a leadership role. And because he's such a deal maker and such a leader and so strong and resolute, he's do this thing, pass this compromise bill. I'm with you 1,000%. I will not leave you in the wilderness. Nap time, and then, why? Don't waste your time. Really. I don't care that he leaves the Republican conference in chaos. But of course, that'll never, so far that's not going to be the story. There'll be a few reporters that say, hey, there's confusion. And I guess there's some stories that are going to say, that are going to note the, I hope, lack of leadership from Trump on this. But it goes so far beyond lack of leadership. It's like, a parody of a lack of leadership. You can't believe the things they're doing, and you think they must be, it must be a hoax. It's made up. It's being exaggerated, whatever. But of course, there's no longer any room for thinking so if you're a sane human being. Yesterday, we spent a good deal of time at the end of the show. I spent a good deal of time at the end of the show, explaining, what I was thinking in terms of why it's my version of why it's no longer viable to treat Donald Trump like he's a legitimate president. There's nothing going on upstairs. He doesn't have the mental capacity to do the job. And he holds the belief, as do it seems almost, the entirety of the team at the White House and elsewhere, that it wouldn't matter no matter what. It wouldn't matter whether he had his wits about him or not, because you can just do whatever you want to do. Say whatever you want to say. Sign an executive order if you think the act of signing one makes it look like the problem is getting better, and it won't matter what's in it. It won't matter what it says. If it says something bad, just say it doesn't say that. And you'll really be unable to check or fact check him on what it says or what it doesn't say, what it means or what it doesn't mean, because they might not even be giving you the correct text of the executive order, which itself might not even be an executive order. So, I don't know how to tell you to proceed from there. As I tried to express this in a series of tweets after the show, but the whole thing ends with, look, there's no answer at the end of this. They just make things up as they go along. And if it really gets bad, they just send Sarah Huckabee Sanders out to say, that didn't happen. You all witnessed it, right? No, it didn't happen. You misunderstood it when you witnessed it. And I'm sure there were a bunch of you out there, some of you, well, I don't know. If you heard the show and then you read the thread, you said, okay, I understand this. If you read the thread and didn't hear the show, I don't know whether they complimented one another or not. I really have no idea. It was sort of off the top of my head. I'm the president from the other side. I have no clue what I said 10 minutes ago. But if you remind me, I'll say, oh yes, I want to be on that spot. That's the difference, I guess, between him and me. Well, one of many, I suppose, or at least I hope so. But if you thought, no, this is crazy, we just don't understand what's going on their side. We just don't understand their thinking over there. It cannot be the case that they are this vicious, that they are this careless, that they are this uninterested in linear time and logic. There aren't people like that. And then Melania Trump went to Texas. It's a big announcement. I'm going on a surprise visit to one of these border regions. I'm going down to Texas. I want to see these people being detained on the borders. I want to talk about the children. I want to see the children's detention centers. I got to do something. I have compassion. I'm the woman in this. I'm the first lady. It's my job to do the soft stuff. And there's a whole theory behind that. But before I get to that, obviously, I'm going to have to, you all know this. I got to inform you. She went to Texas in a jacket that said, I don't really care, do you? And we can theorize about it. We can postulate about it. There's nothing to do, nothing to say. She's not blind. She knows what's on the jacket. And the White House tried for a while. They came right out and said, yes, she wore the jacket. And by the way, there was that uncomfortable hour wherein our very earnest friends, and I mean it, our very earnest friends on our side were of the opinion that, this is beyond the pale, and so far beyond the pale. And besides which, look at the funky writing on the jacket. It's obviously, it could be, they say, a Photoshop. It's a hoax. No possible way. How could you think, really, honestly? Is it not your first thought that it was some sort of Photoshop hoax, that the first lady going to Texas to see the shelters, the jails, the baby jails, would go in a jacket that says, I don't really care, do you? When everyone knows her job is to be the designated carer in this, 'cause woman, and, Donald Trump cares about nothing, etc. But surely he married somebody who was human, and they have some compassion, etc., right? Yes, all of this sort of thing. And then she goes in this jacket. Gotta be a hoax, said our own very good friends. And I understood the impulse. And I suppose for a brief second, and it might have been, the feeling might have gone on longer had I not seen some reliable confirmation of the story. I know I didn't put a stopwatch on it, but I'm sure that somewhere in my head I said, am I positive that this isn't a hoax? Like, who's reporting this? Let me check around. But it was very quickly obvious. No, I'm sorry. That's really it. Here are some photos from different angles. They're from, like, trusted brand name reporters on trusted brand name network news shows. And, well, still, I mean, maybe this company puts out a line of clothing that has all sorts of messages on the same jacket. No, it's just this one. All right. And then, of course, though I did get a couple of responses that were very interesting. And like I said, I can't blame anybody how do you blame somebody for saying, no, really? Come on. It's only, you're only blameworthy if you come out of there saying either, so what, if it is true, or if you say, well, no, I've seen it, but I still don't believe it because, come on. I don't know what you would base it on. She's a woman? I don't know. Does that really persuade anybody? Or she's not like him, or how could anybody? I don't know. But it went on for quite some time, including people who said, I saw her. I'm an eyewitness to this. I saw her at the airport board the plane. She wasn't wearing that. She was wearing a white coat. And then, of course, I realized, as they were saying, that the same white jacket she was wearing with her outfit while she visited the detention center, the baby jail. She didn't visit the baby jail, by the way. Did we know this? There was a big promotional push. I'm going to see the baby jail. But she didn't go to the baby jail. She went to the adult detention center and talked about babies, I guess, a little bit, or had babies talked about around her while she looked around. And I don't know, somehow she still got the headlines that she went to the baby jail. But anyway, she was wearing the same coat that she was wearing on her visit when she got on the plane. And that's when it dawns on me. Oh, you were an eyewitness to her getting on the plane in Texas. These pictures were taken at what used to be referred to as Andrews Air Force Base. Is now, I guess, Joint Base Andrews, or whatever they call it now. Same place where Air Force One and other official government planes carrying White House personnel frequently take off from on their way to the trips. That's where the picture was taken in the green jacket. She wore that on the outbound leg of the flight. And on the return trip, she wore a plain white jacket that went with her outfit. So, I don't know what to tell you about the fact that happened, other than that happened and how horrible it is that happened. But that's the world we're operating in now. And I bring that up only to say, if you finished listening to the show yesterday, or watched the tweet storm about things yesterday, and you still came away with, no, there are still things that they won't do. Why? How could they? How would they? How could they possibly dare, for instance, to, could they really get away with putting out the text of a fake executive order, or simply changing the wording of the executive order if they found out later on that there was something particularly embarrassing about the order or the way it was drafted? And would they really? I mean, you can't just, pardon the housekeeping sounds on the desktop computer there for just a second. But, how can you do that? It's not something that you're allowed to do, right? That doesn't happen. And the thing is, it really does happen. And it happens even outside of this context. But if you didn't believe it, I don't know what doubt could remain in your mind now that you've seen the jacket. Anyway, as I was babbling on about this, also, I got a note from Paula Appanese, our friend Paula writer, who said that she had something to say on the jacket issue too. And looking at the clock, it looks like we're going to have time to actually roll this tape. I haven't had a chance to edit it at all, so sometimes I'm able to get in there and clean things up a little bit. But this is raw, on-the-spot reporting, I guess, which really happened last night and got emailed to me this morning. But why not change voices here for just, well, let's say 4.5 minutes. Is that a good guess? Paula, your turn.
Morning, David. I have a quick comment about this whole Melania Trump trip to Texas stupid jacket thing that just happened. Melania Trump has never looked happy to be in the White House. She has no apparent agenda as First Lady, and she is saddled with a husband who is dishonest, corrupt, and a catastrophically bad president. None of us know what she's really like as a person. Does she approve of Trumpism with all of its Nazi-like qualities? Does she have any political understanding at all? Is she intelligent? Is she well-meaning? Is she as heartless as her horrible husband? Is she another sociopath? We don't know. What we do know is that she gets trotted out occasionally to smooth over something or another, generally with limited to no impact. She is fated to be constantly seen as someone desperately trying to apply lipstick to an already dead pig. So in this case, she's dispatched to Texas to tour an internment facility with the presumed intent of reassuring Americans that concerns about separated families are overblown and there are no atrocities occurring. But we all knew the trip would be a superficial exercise that was not going to answer any of the burning questions. Where are the girls? Where are the babies? What the hell has been happening and how are they going to clean up this mess? Instead, we could anticipate some statements and tweets composed of soothing, non-specific words that would amount to nothing, fix nothing, and change nothing for the asylum seekers. She would garner some positive tweets by the usual suspects in the mainstream media and some flattering coverage on TV, even beyond the propagandists from Fox. And then she would retreat back to wherever she retreats to, her gesture quickly fading, and the Trump circus would swing back into action. But the flattering tweets would garner reams of replies on the theme of too little too late, and would also inspire rounds of online discussion about how essentially useless she is. Because, at this point in time, there is nothing that she can do or say or be filmed doing or saying that is going to be believed by anyone except deplorables, and they don't care about the separated families in the first place. Now, had she acted true to form, her trip to Texas would already be forgotten. But because the asylum atrocities are generating intensive scrutiny and coverage, Trump needs an equal and opposite distraction. And so we get the jacket episode. Melania climbs aboard Air Force One or whatever plane it was, wearing the jacket you've all seen with the message, "I really don't care, do you?" in giant letters on the back. Now, of course, everybody then lies about it. Her spokesperson claims the jacket is meaningless. Pay no attention to clothing. Trump tweets that it's a message aimed at the fake media, saying that she doesn't care what they say. And the rest of us debate the range of possibilities. Is she a heartless sociopath who doesn't give a damn about refugees and had no compunction about letting us all know? Is she sending some kind of weird message to her husband? Is she sending a message to the deplorables, signaling that the trip is just so much nonsense? Of course the administration doesn't care about refugees. Is she the instigator of any message? Or is she Trump's helpless, unwilling pawn? Or is she, to me the least likely explanation, simply a tone-deaf idiot with a tone-deaf incompetent staff who didn't grasp how bad this combination of messages and trip would look? Whatever the true explanation, she doesn't look good. As a deflection, I think the stunt fails. Yes, it got noticed and generated some discussion, but I don't think it made any major dent in the coverage of the real story, Trump's barbaric policy, his deceptive executive order, and the public's appalled reactions. But it did do damage to her not exactly stellar reputation, such as it already was. Up until now, she's actually had at least a smidgen of sympathy for many of us who despise her husband. Many of us had wondered, is she a battered wife, emotionally, physically, both? But this episode wipes out a lot of that, because at this point we can't believe any explanation that's offered, since all the voices coming from this White House are proven liars. The impression I've gotten for a long time is that she would prefer to never appear in public at all. And I think that's wise of her, because Melania Trump is damned if she does and damned if she doesn't. Donald Trump has put her in an impossible position. This is Paula at PaulaWriter.com.
Thank you, Paula. And yeah, I mean, it is pretty much an impossible position, but, I don't have any sympathy for her in that respect, and neither should you. But I don't know. I mean, okay, that's the analysis, and it was good analysis. And then at the end, you wonder, does it matter if we analyze this? And I think probably the content of the analysis pretty much answered the question. No, it doesn't matter very much. And not to say that the analysis wasn't good. I mean, that was the analysis. This doesn't matter. It doesn't make a difference. And I mean, as strategic deflection, I know a lot of people came out with that one. Oh, they're doing this horribly on purpose so that we talk about this instead of what? We're currently talking about his horrific detainee policy. And now we're talking about his horrific detainee policy plus his wife's an asshole. All right. I mean, I don't know how strategic that is. But then again, I've never believed he was strategic at all in any way whatsoever. He's just a big moron who just tweets whatever's on his mind. And there's no strategy behind it. It's just whatever. And increasingly, I guess I'm glad to see this. This morning, the reporters are saying the same. And this would be a watershed moment, I think, except that I don't really believe Maggie Haberman about anything. So I don't know what to do with it. But I've got two tweets here. All in response, both in response to Rachel Bade's tweet. So I guess that makes for three women reporters for national outlets who keep a close eye on things here in D.C. We got the Rachel Bade tweet that says, look, House Republicans can't trust a thing this guy says. Goodlatte did this yesterday, and now he's like completely on the different page. We have Garance Frank Ruta observing of Rachel's observation. Trump's statements are like the Snapchat of political commitments. They exist for a time. They are very engaging, and I'm not even certain they are. And then they disappear. And then, again, I said we were going to come around to Maggie Haberman. Here's Maggie just says, and she says what we say about him. He will say whatever he has to say to get through 10 minutes increments in time. Any 10-minute increment, who knows whether it's 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 1 minute. I have said it is only slightly differently. They'll say whatever they need to say to escape the immediate question before them without regard to how their answer renders inoperative all previous answers to questions or all future answers to questions. They just want to escape the moment. And that's it. And it's amazing that the New York Times own reporter sees it and says it, and it won't make a difference. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, interrupting this little break to say thanks so much to all of you who are contributing supporters of Kagro in the Morning. Thousands of you are downloading the show each day, but fewer than 1 in 25 regular listeners are donating to help keep us on the air. For the money you'd spend on a single 3-minute iTunes song, we bring you 2 hours of great news and entertainment every day, 5 days a week. Patreon.com, Patreon.com makes it easy. You can find us there by searching KagroX or David Waldman or Kagro in the Morning or even Daily Coast Radio in their search box, and you'll be right where you need to be to make easy, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Once again, thanks so much for your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio, and these breaks should be, sometimes I think they should be 1 minute, sometimes I think they should be 20 minutes. It depends on the mood. Today we could all take a day off today, but no, we have to plow through this nonsense and catch up with things. Let's see. Where did I leave off? I was amazed that the reporters, appear to get the picture, but I don't know how quickly things are going to change, and I don't know. Maybe that's an interesting object lesson, right? If does it mean that Maggie Haberman doesn't mean it if she says it, or does it mean that she believes it, but the impact of changing one single reporter's mind, even somebody as influential as Maggie Haberman, doesn't really make a dent? Or do all of them believe this? Is this a watershed moment after all? I don't know. I don't know what to make of it. I can't give you a larger analysis of it right now, but I can point out for you that it's happening and it's interesting, and I hope we can build on it. And, it's useless at this point to speculate on whether this is maybe this is the long-awaited pivot for us. Was that it? We never saw a pivot from Trump because it was us that was supposed to pivot. It wasn't us, not me, not you. We pivoted a long time ago. We voted for somebody else. But maybe the people in the press. I don't know. We can cross our fingers and hope so. Maybe they'll do some reflection this weekend. I don't know. Let me tell you what you can look forward to just briefly. I see this note came through right at the beginning of the show, and a lot of you will be happy to know this, and maybe it'll change your perspective on things. This is as good a time as any to be able to announce that on Monday, That's next Monday. Hopping Mad, our friends Will and Arliss will be back from hiatus. And that is good news, and it couldn't be a more timely return from hiatus. They would like you to know, an interview with Amanda Werner, organizer of the Mexican restaurant protest that sent Secretary of Homeland Security Kirstjen Nielsen scrambling for cover, as she says, like a cockroach exposed to sudden light. And it's just, cockroaches are sensitive about their skin, and they know that exposure to ultraviolet light is not healthy, despite the popular myth that a bronzed glow is in fact a healthy look. But hey, you can't help it if the cockroaches are ahead of the curve on that. And she's not a cockroach. They're smarter than she is. Yeah, that was a hell of a thing. We noted it the other day, and this morning we might as well note there are people outside of her house protesting with signs and chants, etc. But also, of course, the audio taken some days ago of the kids in the baby jail crying for their parents, whom they are no longer with, and that has made the rounds, and they're quite brilliantly deploying it in guerrilla fashion outside of the Trump Hotel, in the entrance that people go in to go hang out at the steakhouse and the bar, and now outside of Kirstjen Nielsen's home, which, as I mentioned the other day, is normally considered to be an out-of-bounds thing. I don't know if she has a family. I really know nothing about Kirstjen Nielsen. But normally it's out of bounds to protest outside of people's homes because their families are there and they may or may not be wrapped up in the same activity. And certainly there could be kids there who are almost certainly not wrapped up in the same activity. However, this whole thing is about families and family units and keeping them together. And if they don't like it, like we said, maybe they should be separated from their parents for their own good. And we'll just keep them separate until we can figure out what the hell's going on here. So the only fear I have about it is, and there won't be any undoing it anyhow. I mean, even if this protest weren't happening, it wouldn't matter for these purposes. In the future, there will be alt-right weirdos protesting outside of the homes of people they hate, and we'll say that's not right because, well, one, the families are in there, et cetera, all the usual rules. And they'll say, but you protested outside of Kirstjen Nielsen's house, and we'll say, well, see there, I know you guys hate nuance, but that was a protest about family separation. And one, so that's, the protest here is actually on topic. The protest of the family unit is actually on topic. And two, of course, it was such a horrific violation of human rights that it really called for extraordinary measures. You protesting outside of somebody's house because they don't agree with you that Teletubby Tinky Winky is gay is not the same sort of a thing here. You're comparing apples and oranges. But, as I said, had this protest never taken place, they would be outside of somebody's house over Tinky Winky anyway. And when we said this is out of bounds, they would say, no, the left does this all the time. And they would name something that might not even be true, may never even have happened. It wouldn't make a difference. You would be baffled by it at the time. You would want to go back and fact check it. You'd go check Google to see if they were lying. They are. And they would keep protesting, probably in diapers. We don't really know for sure. But the point is, it wouldn't matter whether it was true or not. They simply would say it, which is an expected tactic for fringe weirdos. It's just new for the President of the United States, and we're all still catching up with it. Okay, let's see. And by the way, yes, it's true. We still don't know, where the answer is to where are the girls. Bruce McFarland tells us via tweet to our KITM hashtag. Amy Siskin's tweet is forwarded to me. Still no pictures of the girls in detention centers or tent cities, etc. This many days later. Media, this has to be the top question when you have the ability to ask, where are the girls? And I don't know how else to put it. I'm not certain why we're not still on it. I mean, we are. Some of us are, and people are asking it, but I don't know. I feel like it's running out of gas. And, well, what can I tell you? I worry that maybe the signing of this fake executive order might have, I think if it was aimed at anything, it was maybe we can take some of the heat off, maybe we can take some of the gas out of these protests if we do a thing that maybe just the less engaged of us out there as Americans would see this on the news and say, I don't need to show up at a protest. I mean, I was never really a protest person per se, but this had me so, agitated. I thought maybe I should go out to the protest this time. And on the margins, it shaves 10% off of the attendance at the protest and 10% of the heat off and 10% of the hashtagging of where are the girls off. And I think that probably worked. None of us here, I think, were fooled, but in the Gen Pop, as they might say, I think there were probably people who were saying, it's not as urgent an issue as it once was. And of course, all the people involved in it will tell you, yes, it is. Please don't back off, and you shouldn't. All right. I mentioned along the way about the weird trope that they took advantage of in the White House of sending out the First Lady to be that compassionate figure because, breasts and uterus, essentially, is I guess, the idea. A female will always do things with more heart and compassion than a grizzly, tough hunter-gatherer man like Donald Trump in his golf cart with his man boobs. I don't, it's okay to have those. I'm not body shaming. I'm just pointing out that they're, sticking out of your golf shirt, and we can all see it, and that you thought it was disgusting when you saw it on other people, and then something you should talk over with your therapist. But I know you don't go to therapy because you hate that because you're so mentally tough. This isn't what I wanted to talk about. What I wanted to talk about was a fascinating tweet storm from Sonia Drimmer, who is an assistant professor in the Department of History of Art and Architecture. It's a whole department at UMass Amherst. And she's a medievalist. So what do you think about that? I don't know what to make of it. But two interesting things happened with this amazing thread. One was that she wrote it and it was awesome. And it came to my attention, I think via our Twitter pal, Angry Black Lady. But I also saw it brought to my attention later on. This was really interesting. It had been appropriated, essentially. I was being introduced to it. I got introduced to it two different ways. When it was first brought to my attention, it was, hey, this is an awesome thread. You should go read it. Everyone should read this thread. Okay, good. I will. And when it was second time brought to my attention, and I think it was Yoni Applebaum, I have this, basically the presentation was, I had this awesome thought about, and also having an awesome thought was Sonia Drimmer, you should read this. And it was really very weird. It was interesting that the woman who brought it to my attention said, check this out. And the man who brought it to my attention was, well, here's my opinion on yada yada. Basically, I'm just saying, it seemed to strike me as a pretty crystalline example of mansplaining, something that a woman had actually explained to everybody. And I'm not saying it happens every time, and I'm not the person to look to for, the women's studies approach on this. I am merely parroting what I think I've learned along the way. That to me has felt like, oh yeah, that's right. That's kind of enlightening. And so I pass it on. But by way of scholarly analysis of mansplaining, I'm not your person on that. I don't know. I just merely nod my head very frequently, I find, along with the women who point this out and say, that does seem like it is what you're explaining it is. I think I agree with you. And, yeah, and then somebody comes along and says, not all men. I say, I know not all men, but don't say that. It's very annoying. Anyway, Sonia Drimmer is the originator of this line of explanation, and it's a good one, and it's interesting. And how interesting that yesterday's events, can be explained by a medievalist, because you might wonder to yourself, why do we have medievalists? What would be the purpose of that? We don't want to be medieval here. We don't want to go medieval on your ass, although it's increasingly appealing, which I didn't really mean to say anything was increasingly appealing about Donald Trump's ass, but going medieval on it, I suppose, would be. Here, I should better get to the topic here. Confused about what's happening here? Don't be. A medievalist can explain. And here is the thread. And this thread, by the way, came out before the effing jacket story, which I wonder what kind of twist that throws into things. I guess, we can click on Sonia's account and find out later. First, she begins with this screen grab here with the headline, Melania Trump says U.S. should govern, quote, with heart. Breaking news, here's a photo of Melania Trump speaking at something. It's a, file photo, not from yesterday. First Lady's spokeswoman, says Melania, quote, hates to see children separated from their families. And it's a message of hate, ladies and gentlemen, right off the bat. That's bad framing to start with, but okay. We all supposedly know what she means. So what's going on here, medievalist Sonia? Professor Drimmer, pardon me, I probably should do it that way, but I feel so familiar with her now that I've read her tweet thread here. A handy thing in medieval kingship was the use of the queen as intercessor. That's a good word. I like that one. Women were conventionally ascribed softer hearts, and subjects were encouraged to appeal to the queen for mercy. Yes, I feel like I see it in movies or something, which is probably not necessarily the best reflection of medieval reality or scholarship, but that's why I'm asking Professor Drimmer about these things. For example, in 1450, where were you, right? In 1450, after a revolt known as Cade's Rebellion, King Henry VI, that wacko Henry VI, offered a pardon to many participants. Parenthetically, she adds, he also had many executed, but he pardoned others. He was a merciful guy and sent mixed messages, honestly, to be perfectly clear about Henry VI. He did not have his act together, to say the least. Anyway, now that makes a king look weak, right? No king wants that. Least of all, a 400-pound king on his bed in the White House. So, in the preamble to the text of the pardon, always read the preamble, the king claims to have been moved to this gesture of clemency, quote, among others, by the most humble and persistent supplications, prayers, and requests of our most serene and beloved wife and consort, the Queen. This is a very handy thing for a king. He gets to keep his strong profile while pretending to be moved by his wife. This happens habitually in the late Middle Ages. It is a trope. Read Paul Strome's good luck. Hochons, Hochons, Hodors, I don't know. Hochon's Arrow for a chapter on this. Hold on. I'll be right back. Just going to get my copy of Paul Strome's Hochon's Arrow. Not a medievalist. Don't know if that's even a medievalist book. Not a big book. Me and Chuck Blazer, no reading here. You'll figure out what I mean by that. I should have just gone with Donald Trump. I'm secret, by the way, for those of you listening. I've been recording some material for my own hiatus, and Chuck Blazer, the corrupt FIFA official who lived in Trump Tower, makes an appearance. He also doesn't read any books. There are no books in Trump Tower, apparently, unless they bring them in for special events. It's really amazing. Anyway, does anybody, I might be talking completely out of my hat here, like, everybody's got a copy of Paul Strome's Hochon's Arrow, perhaps? Okay, so let's read that chapter. How will we come to understand things if we do? I don't know. Let's read on. What does this have to do with POTUS? One might have just asked a second ago, perhaps. Well, if the current situation with forcing immigrant children into internment camps looks untenable, by which I mean politically inauspicious for him, this becomes part of the apparatus for alibiing a change in policy. You know, his policy. I don't know if alibiing is a word. It certainly doesn't look like it when it's spelled out Alibiing. I don't know. But we get your point, and you're not an English professor. You're a professor of what? Oh, in the Department of History and Art and Architecture. So, okay, spelling usually counts there, but it's Twitter. There will no doubt be a whole complex machinery for framing the change, if such a change occurs. And I hope it does, and fast. And I don't care how it comes about. We just need to save the children. But this is planting the seed for that potential. And by the way, I mean, an additional twist, and I don't think this is necessarily inconsistent with the medievalist interpretation of things, but it's an insight into Donald Trump and his mindset and where he is and, you know, what he's doing when he's, you know, got a hand in his pants is just that in the first instance, his sense of compassion and mercy was awakened in him not by the queen and consort, but by his daughter and maybe consort, Ivanka, who variously has been proclaimed to be the real first lady. Of course, Ivana, her mother, has also claimed to be the real first lady. But there's a real question as to who actually fills the role of first lady in this administration. And the answer is no one, you know, in the traditional sense. But, yeah, he was first moved to this compassion by Ivanka, not Melania. But then they said the more traditional thing to do here is to send Melania. Interesting that Ivanka didn't go, because, I mean, I think even before the jacket thing, if you asked most people, certainly if you asked any of us, which of these two do you, well, I don't know, which of these two do you think is more genuinely, or the closer to being genuinely moved? Because neither of them were genuinely moved. And I guess we would probably answer the question, I would answer the question by saying, well, if I have to pick one, which of the two is the more politically adept at pretending to have compassion for things? And, you know, I don't have any real reason to believe that one or the other of them is more genuine in it. But I do feel like Ivanka's first language is English and Melania's isn't. And I think she's uncomfortable doing public events as a result in a way that Ivanka isn't. So I would have thought to have seen Ivanka go first, but I don't know. Apparently, you know, I mean, the traditional thing is to send the first lady, so they send the first lady. Anyway, where did we leave off? Ah, yes, right. There will no doubt be a whole complex machinery for framing the change, but essentially we should remember that this ancient move plants the seed for that potential change. And as a summary here, the thread finishes up, in the meantime, she becomes the benevolent spokesperson for a cruel regime, presenting a kind image that suggests current policies are driven by pragmatic concerns with the best interests of asylum seekers and Americans in mind, though they're not. And that's amazing and informative and probably true, and then exploded within the hour because our most beloved queen and consort showed up in a jacket that said, "No, seriously, F you, I definitely mean it." and we're like, does she mean it? We don't know what to do with this because it's so far beyond what we thought was possible. We don't know what to do with it. What a day it was. And, you know, I'm sure that I would be scolded by somebody out there, probably on the Twitter side of things. You know, you're spending too much, you're too preoccupied with the jacket, spending too much time on the jacket. And it's really not that were on the jacket. I mean, I don't like, we're not interested who the, what the jacket looks like, or whether it's cut well, or how expensive it is. There's a story there too, by the way. But no, I mean, what we're talking about here is that, how abnormal is this administration? So abnormal that they can't even be medieval, correct? They can't even revive an old stupid trope correctly because this happens. And I guess, like Paula was saying, you could spend time trying to figure out, is she an evil bitch? Was it a mistake? I had people tell me, I think somebody is trolling her. They gave her the jacket on the tarmac thinking, either no way she'd ever wear it, or she doesn't, read English well enough to understand what's going on here, or she's oblivious to things, or she probably thinks we'd never do this to her, or whatever. I saw there were a million, I guess, in a way, fascinating different explanations for how this could have happened, including she hates her husband, so this was her intentionally blowing up the photo op such that he wouldn't get the benefit out of it. Like she had been dispatched by the evil king to go be compassionate because he wanted photos of compassion from the administration to try to tamp down on the Fuhrer, and she put on the jacket to ensure that they wouldn't get it without actually, having to open her mouth and say, I'm only going because I'm being forced to go. I really do care about these kids, but F my husband. He's a jackass and a cruel bastard, and you should depose him as quickly as possible. And then she would be held to account for that. Now she'll be held to account, I guess, for the jacket too. But now, I don't know. So now her husband has been busy spinning it. Oh, it's a statement on the media. Well, whatever, garbage. I told you that there was a whole story about the jacket, too, and you've likely heard this, but I do want to at least mention it in passing. Apparently, the jacket, how necessary was the jacket? It was in the 80s here in D.C. She was flying from weather in the 80s to southern Texas. I don't know that it was jacket weather. I guess it's a rain jacket, and there was some rain in the forecast down in Texas, but she did not wear the coat while she was down in Texas. And I guess people think that lends credence to the theory that she was doing it to blow up the photo op up north, but didn't want people to actually see her wearing it down south because she's not completely crazy. But I don't know. Who cares? Shouldn't have happened. And also, I guess my first round of questions about the thing was, why would anybody have such a coat? What kind? Well, why does that say anything? Well, it's just one of those fashion things, right? Fashion makes no sense. You just put random stuff on things in some cases. And, people are like, hey, graphic tees. It's a picture of the Death Star. Why? I don't know. It doesn't have any words on it. I don't know. Who can explain garbage that gets sold, on the internet for nothing? And that brought us to this thing. I thought also, is it possible that this is such a dumb looking thing that you could have told me that this was $3,900 designer material, and I would believe it because, would Melania Trump be dumb enough to drop $3,900 on a rain slicker you can get at Walmart? Sure. You bet. No doubt about it. Happens all the time, I'm sure. Then word got out that it was a name-ish. There was a name to the maker. It wasn't like fashion design thing. It's just, an apparel line by the name of Zara, and they make casual clothing, and this was a, relatively speaking, cheapie. It's a $39, not $3,900, $39 coat, and this became just more puzzlement. Why does she need a coat? It's 80 degrees out. Why does she need a raincoat? Okay, she's going to the rain, but she didn't wear the thing down there, so what's the point of bringing a raincoat at all if you're not going to wear the raincoat at the point where it rains? And by the way, when it did rain, she said, I'm going home. Forget the rest of this trip. Like I said, she never made it to the baby jail. 3, when was the last time, people ask me, when was the last time Melania was caught out in public in a $39 anything? That's probably true, too. Then it was like, all right, well, back to the theorizing that she's actually a deplorable herself. And remember, she was a pretty enthusiastic birther back in the day, although many people still think, well, that was just in support of her husband. don't know what to make of it. Anyway, here's a tweet from someone who tweets under the name of Boho Girl Resists. So you can find her at the address of Kiki Adine. This is not helping anybody, but Kikiadine. And, just a person out there who happens to have noticed this. This is a picture, she says, of the jacket that Melania wore to visit Texas today. We all know what it's all about. I really don't care, do you? I don't understand why you would put that on a jacket at all, but okay. Anyway, it was made by the company Zara. And I also saw some people who are friends of ours out on Twitter who said, what's wrong with Zara? I like their stuff. I got a couple pairs of pants and blouses or tops from them. They make, nice, casual stuff. Well, I guess you haven't seen the full line, and who knows? When was the last time? Do you know what every piece of clothing a manufacturer that you happen to like looks like? No. You wouldn't think to explore necessarily. However, as it turns out, this company, Zara, has been in our sites before. And, we like to keep records of things like that here on this show. Kiki Adine here puts 3 other pictures in here. Here are a few more of their most noteworthy articles of clothing, and asks us to please retweet it. Melanie knew exactly what she was doing. Still a question mark about that, but I don't see any reason to give her the benefit of the doubt. There are 3 clothing items here. 1, a denim skirt that is decorated. It's distressed, and it's decorated all over with Pepe the Frog memes, essentially. There are little patches, cutout patches of Pepe the Frog cartoons. Could it be that they don't know exactly what that is and what they're getting into? Well, I guess it could be the case unless you also looked over in their handbags, one of which is decorated, otherwise quite attractively with what looks like embroidered flower pots and flowers and animals and bright suns and blooms and swastikas. What? Why? Yeah, a couple of swastikas in there. But again, maybe that's the old ancient Indian good luck charm swastikas. Of course, you may remember Zara as the people who put out those pajama tops that looked like concentration camp prison garb, complete with a yellow star. That's them. Wow. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We just had that brief break. Could use a little more breathing room. Should have played the music twice. But look, I need to get back to this. Yes, it's true. We squeezed it in just before the break. Many of you probably remember the Twitter furor, no pun intended, that arose independent of all of this. Probably, I don't know. It was a couple of years ago. I don't know whether it's a pajama top or what, but it looks like one. It could be a standalone, top, a blouse. I don't know. Anyway, it's black and white horizontal stripes, marked with a sheriff star, not seriously, but a yellow 6-pointed star. I don't know what, like a patch, like sewn onto the thing. And I don't know what to tell you. I think that was they tried to pass that off, as I recall, as just, I don't know, it was just thrown together. Designers who just had no idea that combination meant anything. Although why, you might think, what complements black and white horizontal stripes? Big yellow star. And what shape should the star be? It should be 6 points. I don't know how you put that together unless, the only possible explanation is a person who looked through some sort of photos and saw it and had no clue what they were looking at in the photo. I don't know. What, there's no innocent explanation for that. Could there be? And then I guess if you thought that there was, and then you were like, oh, okay, there's a swastika handbag. That's problematic. And Pepe the Frog patches on a denim skirt. How did you come to pick all of that? We just keep, unfortunately, looking at photographs, a select bunch, very interestingly enough, of photographs out of context and saying that would make great women's casual wear. So I don't know. Now, what a jacket that says, I don't really care, do you, has to do with any of that, I don't really know. Put in context, you could say, well, I don't know. I guess it means something because the clothing line that these people put out rather consistently puts out things of highly questionable taste that, everybody does. But in this case, the questionable taste is racism, as expressed in casual women's wear. So that's troubling, to say the least. How they thought the rest of America was going to get the opportunity to glean a message of racism from a jacket that says, I don't really care, do you? I don't know. Maybe this was just a happy bonus for them. Or maybe they I don't know. Maybe they heard that she was on her way to Texas, and there is a Zara store about a mile from the White House. They rushed one over for her and said, this is exactly what you need for today. And she agreed. I got no idea. And we may never know. And maybe the Russians gave it to her. I got nothing there's no explanation for how that thing ends up in her hands. There really isn't. Anyway, other than I need to buy this because one day I might need to spit on somebody publicly without saying so out loud. Find me the charitable explanation. I don't have it for you. Let's see. Let's catch up on a couple of other items and move on to some others. Oh, there's more Supreme Court decisions happening today. Armando's probably driving around, reading them and, nearly crashing into people on his way through Florida. But we'll see if that should come up, or if we want to wait for Monday on that stuff. That would be a fine use of our time, and use the weekend to digest these things. Let's see. Anything else we need to catch up on? Otherwise, lots of interesting commentary. What the heck? Wow. Okay. Briefly distracted by tweeted photos of what appears to be a nude photo shoot with Australian golf legend Greg Norman. Fantastic. For those of you what can I tell you? The Horse Whisperer is just tweeting this around saying the Cabaret reboot looks terrible. But there he is. I wasn't expecting that and don't know how to feel about it. Greg Norman's not a young man, and so good for him. He's still, you can judge for yourselves. He still appears to be in relatively good physical condition, which is good news for him, and I would have said up to now his intimate partners, but now the world gets to share in it, and they do things differently down there in Australia. I wasn't expecting that to be in the news. Moving on. You can interpret that any way you like. I'm just sort of at a loss. I like Greg Norman. He was a good golfer. I never thought of him this way. If you ever did, this might be your opportunity. This might be something you've been waiting for a long time, but you might have wished for at an earlier period in his life or yours when you could have done something about it, let's say. But, okay, look, I don't want to be too ageist about this, but anyway, he's got one of his, they're taking the shot such that there's nothing you can't see. You can see there that you wouldn't be able to see at a public pool, let's say. Not one of those special naked pools that they have in the United States Senate. I'm saying. He's wearing the hat, his traditional hat, on his head. He's not using that either. He just got his legs positioned. Enough! You'd think I was interested in this picture. Anyway, moving on. There really are other subjects out there. Here's a very interesting story. How do you segue from this? But important. Washington Post is reporting it, but it's still important because, whatever. Anyway, I think I saw Christine Wilkie tweeting about this last night, and it's rather astounding and a great way to forget all about Greg Norman. National Enquirer sent stories about Trump, the headline reads, to his attorney, Michael Cohen, before publication. People familiar with the practice say. That is a tough headline, a very long one. Accompanies a story by Sarah Ellerson, again in the Washington Post. Did you get what that meant? If you didn't, there's this whole other bunch of words that happen underneath the headline that explain what it was all about and give you further details. During the presidential campaign, National Enquirer executives, and you remember he's good friends with the publisher of the National Enquirer, and they're a tabloid rag, and they don't mind. They're dabbling in fake news and then pulling back from it just in the nick of time so they don't get sued all the time is their specialty. So here's what happened. During the presidential campaign, National Enquirer executives sent digital copies of the tabloid's articles and cover images related to Donald Trump and his political opponents also to Trump's attorney, Michael Cohen. He's not his attorney, and really I would argue never was, but okay. But they sent them out in advance of publication, according to 3 people with knowledge of the matter, an unusual practice that speaks to the close relationship between Trump and the real name of the chief executive of the paper, David Pecker. Not even kidding. David Pecker. Do you know Greg Norman? Greg, David, Greg. He's the chief executive of American Media Incorporated, which is the Enquirer's parent company. So just to be clear here, because I was talking about Greg Norman again, is the fact that what was happening is anytime there was a story about Trump or one of his opponents, before publishing the thing, the National Enquirer would send it to Michael Cohen, and therefore Donald Trump, and the rest of the story outlines, are you okay with this? They would ask, can we run this thing? What do you say? Now, what other newspaper does that? It's not a newspaper really, but it's made of paper. Although the company strongly denies ever sharing such material before publication, sure. These 3 individuals say the sharing of material continued after Trump took office. Since Trump's become president, and even before, Pecker openly all right. Pecker openly just has been willing to turn the magazine, that's what they call it, and the cover over to the Trump machine, said one of the people with knowledge of the practice. It's interesting that they call it a magazine and not a newspaper, right? I guess that's closer to what it really is. It's just a very, very cheap paper magazine. During the campaign, if it was a story specifically about Trump, then it was sent over to Michael. And as long as there were no objections from him, the story could be published, this person added. It's the most horrific corruption of the press you could ever hope to see laid bare. Hey, Greg, how's it going? How's it hanging, Greg? Behind the leg, I hope. Anyway, I would say it was a huge corruption of the press, but I mean, do you even consider the National Enquirer to be like a member of the press? If the Philly Inquirer were doing it, God forbid, that would be maybe a different story. But should we bother even throttling back on the outrage from this? I don't know. Why? Enough morons consider that to be news that it's worrying. I think that should be good enough for us for right now. The Enquirer's alleged sharing of material pre-publication with Trump's attorney during the campaign highlights the support the tabloid news outlet offered Trump as he ran for president. It also intersects with a subject that federal prosecutors have been investigating since earlier this year, Cohen's efforts to quash negative stories about Trump during the campaign. That's the nexus here. Interesting that the Washington Post refers to the Enquirer as a news outlet, albeit a tabloid news outlet. The insiders at the National Enquirer refer to the National Enquirer as a magazine, which I think has different implications. Maybe I'm overthinking it. But anyway, they know that it's a vehicle, a vector for injecting positive or negative news coverage in general. And when you cover something really super controversial, even in a National Enquirer, people do sit up and take notice, and mainstream media do comment on it, even though they, very frequently will say, well, take it with a grain of salt, it's in the National Enquirer. But the National Enquirer of late had been very aggressive in defending its trustworthiness in a way, defending lawsuits against people who say this is a false story and I'm suing, and defamation, etc. and they tend to win a lot of those suits. I mean, it seemed from that like maybe they were doing at least the bare minimum necessary to back up claims that they were publishing. So they were doing this with an eye toward maintaining some level of credibility. Anyway, I guess the interest here is maybe stems from the Stormy Daniels thing. Cohen worked hard to quash negative stories about Trump during the campaign, may have employed some illegal means in doing so with respect at least to the Stormy Daniels story. So what else might be out there? As part of that inquiry, then, prosecutors are also looking into whether Cohen broke campaign finance laws, according to people familiar with the investigation. And as you recall, at its height, the Stormy Daniels story finally did morph into wasn't there an illegal in-kind contribution along the way here somewhere? Whoever paid Stormy Daniels to be quiet was doing so for the sake of the campaign and to spend $130,000 on behalf of the campaign was somewhere along the line an illegal in-kind contribution, depending on who did it and why and when. Federal prosecutors subpoenaed American Media Incorporated as part of their investigation into Cohen, the Wall Street Journal reported earlier this week. And they did, and I failed to note it, though it is in pocket. I thought, that's interesting. Wonder what will come of it, because I knew, as you did, about the close relationship between the publisher over there and Trump. And the relationship that we knew of, I don't know if we, maybe at some point the rest of this had made its way into my consciousness. But what I remember about the relationship between Trump and the National Enquirer was the role that they would play in the, what do they call it, capture and kill play, when Playboy playmates who had sex with Trump began trying to shop their stories around. It was the job of the National Enquirer to show up pretending to be an interested publisher, to pay some amount of money for the exclusive rights to tell the story, all of which was meant to look like they were genuinely interested in publishing it, and therefore convince the woman that this is what she wanted. She was trying to sell the story. Here was a buyer. Terrific. National Enquirer is just the sort of place that would, in fact, offer to pay $100,000 or whatever it is to a person like me in exchange for this story. So it's very believable. They take the money, sign the contract, and the National Enquirer would then own exclusive rights to the story. And, again, the exclusive rights thing probably wasn't very surprising to the women selling the stories either. You see this all the time on the front page. Exclusive. Donald Trump caught in cheating scandal, right? So that was expected. And then the play was, well, now that we own the rights exclusively, we simply will decide not to publish them because we love Donald Trump for whatever reason. We have this relationship with him. We don't want to embarrass him. We only meant to buy the exclusive rights so that you couldn't take this story to someone else, and then we would kill the story and then it would never be told. You got the money. What are you complaining about? It was really rather a brilliant play. So they were looking into that, I guess, over at the Mueller investigation shop. And that means we got to take a look at the National Enquirer and its operations and its publisher and its parent company. So that's how they got to this. So let's see. Where did we say? A Justice Department official said Pecker did not fall under the regulation that governs when and how prosecutors can obtain records of members of the news media. Interesting. American Media Incorporated has and will continue to comply with any and all requests that do not jeopardize or violate its protected sources or materials pursuant to our First Amendment rights, AMI spokesman John Hammond said. Are these two competing theories here? Is that what we're reading? That quote from AMI, I understand. Federal prosecutors subpoenaed American Media as part of their investigation. A Justice Department official said Pecker, the publisher, did not fall under the regulation that governs when and how prosecutors can obtain records of members of the news media. I'm not sure what that's supposed to mean exactly, unless they're saying we don't really consider you like true First Amendment media. I don't know how they could really say that, but it doesn't matter. I mean, they subpoenaed them. That's just how they would approach any media outlet. So I'm not sure how to take that. Pecker, declined to be interviewed for this story. You can ask Greg Norman's Pecker. I guess he's being interviewed over on the other story. Dylan Howard, the company's chief content officer, called it completely false that Trump and Cohen, quote, were told in advance and copies were shared in advance, and that they had some sort of sway over who the magazine attacked on any given week. Well, they've said it's completely false, so that's how you know it's completely true. In an interview last week in AMI's downtown Manhattan offices, Howard said that if stories were shared... I've skipped right over it. Who's Howard again? Dylan Howard, the company's chief content officer. Okay, they do content. Howard said that if stories were shared, it was not at the behest of me or David. And quite frankly, if they were shared, I'm a little concerned because people are acting as rogues and renegades. Say, I gotcha. We made a very public endorsement of Trump, he continued, so it would be out of the ordinary for me to commission stories on his opponents, given that we had endorsed Donald Trump. Not the kind of story you do. That's not unusual at all. And that's what I did, Howard said. I didn't do that at the behest of candidate Trump or anyone associated with him. I did it because we were chasing good stories. Trump has never been consulted on editorial decisions, or by himself or through intermediaries requested an article to be written on a given subject or angled in a certain way. I doubt that. We do not run or kill stories on the behest of politicians, even if they are the President of the United States. Of course, that person who asked you to spike the Karen McDougal, was that right, story, wasn't the politician or the President of the United States at the time, and so this is basically a non-denial denial. Cohen did not return calls or text messaged requests for comment. The White House referred calls to Trump's personal counsel, Rudolph W. Giuliani, who did not respond to requests for comment. Once Inquirer editors sent a story or cover image, sometimes a request for changes came back. According to two of the people with knowledge of the relationship, stories about Trump were positive in nature, and changes in stories were not dramatic, according to one person with knowledge of the matter. We're down from 3 to 2 to 1, who said most of the changes in stories sent to Cohen resulted in more flattering cover photos or changes to cover headlines. Trump suggested, which also, by the way, I think escapes the definition in the denial. Trump suggested stories to Pecker on a regular basis, one of these people said, and had access to certain pieces, including one about Hillary Clinton's health, before publication. These people spoke on the condition of anonymity because they feared legal action or professional retribution. Don't consider yourself professionals, please. If they spoke publicly about Trump or AMI, which publishes other celebrity-focused titles, including Us Weekly, The Globe, and Star, which is amazing. Just because, I mean, do they have any competitors? I guess Weekly World News is not them, right? But basically all the tabloids in the supermarket racks are theirs. AMI's alleged practice of sharing advance copies of articles with Trump and his intermediaries has not been previously reported. Exclusive. The relationship between Trump and Pecker dates back decades. Oh, boy, does it ever. But the communication between Trump, Cohen, and Pecker's publications, that should be the name of the company, ramped up during the... ramped up. Oh, well, during the presidential primaries and the general election in 2016. According to Sam Nunberg, the foremost expert in ramped up Peckers, an early Trump campaign advisor, Sam Nunberg is, he was out of there. Well, we only worked together for a short time, right? The Inquirer was Cohen's account, that's in quotes, like that's you deal with the Inquirer. And the relationship with the Inquirer was, quote, a big commodity in Trump's circle. You know, Trump thought it was awesome. I'm sure that's one of the things that he's most proud of. The tabloid was such a help to Trump during the primary, and even the general, said Nunberg, who compared the Weekly to a campaign mailer. Okay, then I've put the emphasis on something incorrectly, but you get the idea. It was such a help to the Trump campaign. He compared it to a weekly campaign mailer. Mailers, by the way, are expensive to produce and send to prospective voters, only a small percentage of whom actually open them. However, if you get something on the cover of the National Enquirer, Nunberg said, it's a publication that people pay attention to in the grocery store. He's right. I mean, varying levels of attention, but I see them. And I hate him, and I pay attention to him. You're conveying a message, and it's free media. During the campaign, in addition to stories written about him, Trump was particularly interested in stories about Clinton's health, two of the people said. They cited two cover stories, one published in September of 2015 that declared she had, quote, in all caps, 6 months to live. And another, a year later, ironically enough, that purported to disclose her secret medical file. The cover on the latter issue portrayed Clinton as so pale and aged that she looked, in the words of one former AMI employee, like a zombie. That cover story was sent to Cohen in advance, according to people with knowledge of the situation. Howard denied the story was sent outside AMI and said it was not published to advance the agenda or narrative of a particular candidate. We merely went where the newsstand dictates, he said. An analysis of the Enquirer's newsstand performance showed that covers featuring Trump performed above average, and negative stories about Clinton resonated with the Enquirer audience, just like they have for 20 years, he said. All right, that's probably something, too. By the way, was Michael Cohen ever in any capacity, like, officially connected with AMI? I wonder if that's sort of another denial thing. Like, it never went outside of AMI, but you sent it to Michael Cohen. Yeah, he's insider. Like, is he on the board of directors or anything like that? Just kind of curious. Cohen, Pecker, and Howard communicated about Trump rivals such as Ben Carson, Carly Fiorina, and other Republican primary candidates, according to the three knowledgeable people. I just was flashing back to, like, isn't that a Christmas carol? The three knowledgeable people come to visit? Okay. That's a very modern formulation of the story. Plus, though, a fourth person aware of the practice, who wasn't very knowledgeable, I guess, but aware of it. Two of these people cited a story on Carson, a neurosurgeon, about his alleged botched operations as an example of a story Trump suggested to Pecker, and I could absolutely see that. Howard said the story came from legal filings, not Trump. After the story ran, Carson said, and they can come from both. I mean, if Trump gets a hold, somebody hands him like, oh, here's some legal papers on this whole thing. Check it out. Pass it on to the Enquirer. Okay, I will. No, it came from legal filings that Trump gave us or told us we could get. After the story ran, Carson said, generally speaking, there is no one who does the number of operations that I did who aren't going to find, oh boy, some people who are going to be disgruntled. Although really, disgruntled is not really something we talk as disgruntled customers at McDonald's, not brain surgery patients. I'm sure there are some. It's just not really the terminology we use. But okay, the Enquirer he's right in the sense that every doctor, or certainly every surgeon eventually probably, is questioned about malpractice, if not sued. The Enquirer had some sway over the news cycle in both the Republican primary and the general election. During the primary, the paper ran a story on Ted Cruz's father's purported link to the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. And again, here's the question of whether that came from Trump first or the Enquirer first. And it's easy enough to believe that the Enquirer runs it because it's just one of those stupid things. And Trump reads the Enquirer like he watches Fox News and just blurts it out like it's real. His campaign called it garbage. Cruz's did, of course. There was also a story about Cruz's rumored affairs. That's hard to believe, too. Cruz attacked that story, of which there was never any evidence, as a plant from the Trump campaign. But now he's changed his mind and he loves Donald Trump. But Howard said that Enquirer's cover on Cruz grew out of a tip from operatives close to Marco Rubio. And Armando believes that. Terry Sullivan, Rubio's former campaign manager, said the notion that Rubio's camp had circulated the Cruz rumors was, quote, utterly bizarre and 100% absurd and not true. An FBI raid executed on April 8th in Cohen's office and residences sought all of the lawyer's records of communications with AMI, Pecker, and Howard regarding two women who claimed to have had affairs with Trump while he was married, according to three people familiar with the investigation. Is it the same three people or what? The search warrant served on Cohen also sought all communications he had with Trump or the Trump campaign about any negative publicity that might arise during the presidential race, according to a person familiar with the investigator's work. The warrant sought all his communications about an embarrassing Access Hollywood tape that surfaced, you know all about it, in October 2016, weeks before the election. Let's see, what else here? In late 2015, AMI paid $30,000 to a one-time Trump Tower doorman who was offering an embarrassing story about then-candidate Trump. The tabloid said in a statement it never published the claim because of questions about its credibility. Then there was the Karen McDougal story, for which they paid $150,000. I don't know, I guess they also paid her to write fitness columns for AMI papers and pose for covers, and of course never discussed the alleged relationship with Trump. There's a bit more here, but I think you get the picture of it all, and according to one source familiar with the rest of this article, we have to take a break. So we'll do that and come right back. Hi everybody, it's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Or read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's sum things up. It's our last segment before exiting for the weekend. It's Friday. Holy cow. It's a wacky morning show, et cetera, et cetera. What are we going to do here? We really need to kind of change directions here. And there are some stories we should put on the record. We're finished with the National Enquirer, which is maybe a paper of record. I don't know. We'll see how things shake out once the New York Times is finished. Let me bring you up to date with this quick entry that I'm not entirely up to date on by way of, I guess, the background investigation into how this happened. But you and I are, of course, familiar with the story that the Commerce Department, which is in charge of the census for whatever reason, has been working not entirely behind the scenes, but has been working to try to include in the next census questions specifically pertaining to citizenship, asking people, what is your citizenship? And so, in other words, a vehicle for cataloging all legal, presumably, not as well as illegal, although I'm sure they're not answering the census, but getting people who are legally residing in this country to answer specifically a line item question in the census. Yes, I am not a citizen of the United States at the moment. And that seems unnecessary and possibly dangerous in this atmosphere to be asking that question. And so there was a big uproar about including the question. And then, of course, some back and forth over the plain facts of whether or not that question had ever been asked in the past, or whether it was asked in the most recent census, and if it was asked in the past, whether that makes it fair game to ask now under new circumstances, etc. And it went back and forth, but there was also some question about how did this arise. It was, I guess, clearly established that in recent years that question has not been included in the census. So an affirmative move to include it in a new census, we wondered, where did it come from? Who asked for it and why? And I guess the story that the administration was trying to promulgate and stick by, and they can't stick by anything because everybody is out for themselves in this chaos administration, right? The story they were trying to stick with was that the Department of Justice had somehow made this request of the Department of Commerce. Commerce oversees the census, and so those at Justice said, we would like to see a question on citizenship posed, and the cover story, and I'm not exactly certain how it connected or why, they said, we want it to help with enforcement of the VRA, the Voting Rights Act. Exactly how or why that would make any sense, I don't know, but that's the story they were telling. However, I saw a tweet from Daniel Jacobson, a former Obama White House lawyer, who tweets, "Yep, this is amazing," in response to the tweet of Dale Ho, who is the director of the ACLU's Voting Rights Project. Dale, how do we want to do this? Dale tweets, "Further evidence that the Trump administration has been lying about supposedly needing this info to enforce the VRA. They now admit the idea didn't come from DOJ after all." And he's referring to someone else's tweet. But Daniel points out, yes, this is amazing, summarizing the whole thing this way, saying Wilbur Ross, the Secretary of Commerce and Sago Mine murderer, says Ross just admitted in a court filing that Commerce called DOJ and said, "Hey, we need you to say that you need this citizenship question for VRA enforcement." In other words, it was just something that Commerce on their own, Wilbur Ross on his own, wanted to see done. I mean, he knew that the president would appreciate this because the president is a racist and would love to harass people if possible, particularly those who are not American citizens. But the whole thing was constructed as a cover story. I need the Department of Justice to pretend they're asking us to do this as cover. And that is kind of surprising. I'm not as familiar with this backstory, but just trying to trace it down to something that could explain it. Dale Ho was tweeting, his comment, "Further evidence that the Trump administration's been lying," in response to Sam Levine. Look at this chain of evidence here. Sam Levine is a voting rights reporter at HuffPost, and he says in his tweet, "Breaking, in supplemental disclosure in a federal lawsuit, Wilbur Ross says he began considering the addition of a citizenship question soon after he was appointed Secretary of Commerce. He says other senior administration officials had previously raised it," and links to, I guess, a PDF of the actual filings in the court case there. He goes on to say this is significant because he discloses for the first time that it was the Commerce Department that approached DOJ about adding the question. The Trump administration had framed this so far as a request originating from Justice. So that is rather interesting, and I'm sure revealing of a much larger and more important story behind the scenes, but I'm just putting that out there to see if we can develop it further or if there are breaking news elements to it next week or whenever they get around to considering this case. We will have noted it and can return to it from that perspective. All right, what else have we got here that we want to include here? Oh, I have a piece here from the Washingtonian that's intriguingly entitled, "The Kirstjen Nielsen Protest at a D.C. Mexican Restaurant Was a Watershed Moment. Here's How It Really Went Down." And I was going to share that one, but then, like I said earlier in the show, I got notice here that Amanda Werner, who organized the protest, is going to be interviewed, or was interviewed, on what will be Monday's return from hiatus podcast of Hopping Mad right here on Netroots Radio. And so it would probably be best to simply let Amanda explain the whole thing in her own words to Will and Arliss. And so we'll defer to them for the story, although I'd really like to hear it. And if you just can't wait, the Washingtonian has that story. And just to sort of tease you on it here, we'll say Amanda Warner's, the first paragraph here. Amanda Warner's friend was dining at MXDC. I don't know do they say like MEXDC or something like that? MX Mexico like DC, a Mexican restaurant, when he recognized none other than Kirstjen Nielsen at the sleek downtown Mexican restaurant just the day after the Department of Homeland Security Secretary defended the separation of children from their parents at the border. Now, we'll let the rest of the juicy details be spilled to you on Monday, but you can imagine this is probably pretty interesting and how it went down and who's Werner anyway and how did she know what to do and who to call. to make one of these things happen, and that'll all be fascinating backstory. We'll just save it for Monday, but if you just can't wait, check it out in the Washingtonian, and that will only whet your appetite, so to speak, for tuning in to Will and Arliss Hopping Mad on Monday. Do you know when it airs? 8 a.m. Eastern Time. It leads into every Monday morning when they're not on hiatus, which they're not anymore. Did you know that? Every Monday morning just before this show. So if you know how to tune in to listen live to the Kagro in the Morning show, wake up earlier and hear Arliss, Bunny, and Will McLeod explain it all on Hopping Mad. I encourage you to do so. I just did, in case you had any doubt. Of course I encourage you to do so. Didn't you hear me? What are you doing? Wake up. Wake up, girl. What's wrong with you? Okay, anyway, let's see. Other things that we need to put on the record that we actually have time to do. Let's just jump down to rightwingwatch.org for this sort of weird news out of the blue. I don't know how this got to me, but I'm glad it did. You remember that crazy, super crazy, like if you take alt-right and, you know, the old trope, put it on steroids, right? What's crazier than the alt-right wackos? QAnon, right? Q anonymous, whatever sort of thing. They're the ones, I think, disseminating the wackiest of the wacky conspiracy theories, fake news, garbage on behalf of Trump, right? And like Roseanne Barr at her mentally weakest moments was continuously buying into their theories and retweeting them all the time. Jared Holt at Right Wing Watch tells us this. The Trump team gives VIP rally access to QAnon truther. That rally he just did in, where was he? In Duluth? Yeah. When President Trump approached the podium at his rally last night, this was the other night, what was it, Tuesday maybe, in Duluth, Minnesota, he paused for a split second to gesture to a man wearing a shirt emblazoned with the letter Q. No secret meaning, though. The Q on the man's shirt refers to the right-wing conspiracy theory known as The Storm that has thousands of adherents online. And if you think about how many people there are in the world and how many of them are online, the fact that there are thousands of adherents tells you what? It means they're barely a blip on the radar. Like this show. We have thousands of adherents, but nobody's writing huge articles about this show. Possibly because we're not saying crazy enough things. I thought we were plenty crazy yesterday, but it's not working. The theory goes like this, in case you were wondering about the storm. I think I explained it once. You might remember it when I give you some of these details. President Trump is not actually under investigation for possible collusion with Russian officials, but rather he is secretly working overtime to dismantle a global network of satanic pedophiles involving some of the most powerful global elites and to share the information on this secret project. According to the theory, Trump has ordered top-level officials to disseminate cryptic pieces of information known as crumbs to a bunch of random people on 4chan and 8chan, which presumably is twice as bad as 4chan. Is that why they did it? Who spend hours trying to put the puzzle pieces together. The conspiracy theory has been spread by the likes of InfoWars and by, well, comedian, they say, Roseanne Barr, but some conspiracy theorists have recently begun to allege that the whole operation was compromised. It was compromised. When? Because compromised once the unknown authors of the Q posts started to criticize one-time Q believers like Jerome Corsi and David Seaman of attempting to profit off the movement. I don't really know why that would matter, but it does. But they're crazy, so who cares? So this is the whole thing, is that President Trump is the international crime fighter here, and he's trying to, he knows all, but he can't reveal it. He needs people like you from 8chan to piece together the clues and crack the crime by yourselves, and then he'll give you a pat on your little head. As crazy as all that sounds, it apparently did not stop anyone on the Trump advance team from giving someone advertising this theory front row VIP access at the other night's rally. As you'd expect, the fans of QAnon conspiracy went wild. Followers of the conspiracy theory claimed that Trump gesturing to the cheering man wearing the QAnon shirt was irrefutable proof that the theory is real. I mean, it's a real theory. It's just garbage. Garbage is real. Even the anonymous author of the Q posts noticed the man posting, "Now that's what I call a VIP." Not even sure, whatever. Okay. The Q poster also wrote that he and his colleagues, who were supposedly responsible for the QAnon theory, left the decision on timing to Trump about when he would reveal his ties to the storm, and that today at the rally he made his decision. The posters told followers to look for more direct confirmations in the future. And, whatever. If you can make up anything as a symbol, then that's the beauty of a theory like this. I'm sure somebody's having a fantastic time doing this. Q also shared a Facebook post claiming that a man got on a table at the Trump rally and started to expound on the QAnon theory, and says that he started a call and response chant of the QAnon catchphrase, "Where we go one, we go all." Q wrote back, "We hear you, patriots." QAnon adherents are also apparently I was going to say they're suspect, but what it says is QAnon adherents also suspect that Trump may have made a hand gesture during his speech to signal to them. And okay, sure. One of those 10,000 hand gestures. I have a secret hand gesture signal for you, QAnon. I'm doing it right now, but I'm stopping. Because it's lewd and really, it's just not right, even on radio. Anyway, interesting. It's out there. There's a lot of weirdos out there, man. And, you should just be aware of who they are and what they're doing. All right. I guess we should take note of the fact that the White House is floating a plan. I don't know how seriously to take it, because nothing in particular is going to get through Congress at any point in the near future. But we'll just note for the record, the White House is, in fact, floating a plan to combine the Departments of Education and Departments of Labor into one department. So I don't know what happens here. I guess you put Betsy DeVos and Alex Acosta on an island, and we watch them for a couple of weeks and vote one of them off. I don't know what happens to both of them. I don't think that's their main it's their main concern. I don't think it's Donald Trump's main concern. But, it's not something that you can order by yourself. These are, of course, if rules apply, if there's any rules left, and it's not all just LOL, YOLO, nothing matters, Congress would have to be the one to do this thing, because these are congressionally created departments, and whatever. But, maybe according to why don't you justism, I suppose Donald Trump could just say, I'm signing an executive order to do it, and Congress should act as soon as possible. And I guess you could say, here's what I want done: lock the doors on the Labor Department building and say, anybody who wants to keep working at Labor, go find a desk at Education and make it work that way. And I'm really, honestly, why not? Why would that not be the way that's the way I would do it if I was just a crazy a-hole that was like, whatever I say goes, I just do that. So I suppose you could look for that in the future. More likely, he'll wander around the house saying, God damn it, I wish that, they would do something. And Congress will say, we're working on it. And he'll just continue to say, and he'll begin to tell rally goers, I'm working on it right now. It's happening as we speak. And they'll cheer for it for no particular reason. I don't know why they would be particularly enthused about that, but it sounds like less government, but it really isn't. It just means things aren't working as well, and that's about it. There were plenty of stories I had about what was going on immigration votes. They're all moot, so we'll leave that aside for some other information. And I don't know, let's throw in something, one or two things that are totally random that might be of interest, might develop into a story later you'll be glad to know about, or could be just extraneous garbage. The Palm Beach Daily News, always a good source for stuff that you'd think is local and picayune, but because the president has such a tremendous interest in what's going on down there in Palm Beach, could be something. The president's sister has sold her Palm Beach house. We're talking about Marianne Trump Berry, who is a federal judge and was for a long, long time before Donald Trump came on the political scene. And she's actually like a legit judge and everything, and a high-ranking one at that. Isn't she on the Third Circuit? Maybe I don't know. Maybe I have that wrong. But she's a long-time judge and, like a normal person and everything. But she comes from the Trump family, so she has a very expensive house in Palm Beach. It's no Mar-a-Lago, but I'm sure it's nice. So she sold it. Who cares, right? Well, even after I tell you who she sold it to, we don't really care, but might raise an eyebrow. She sold it to a company headed by her nephews, Eric and Donald Trump Jr. Not to the two of them, but to a company headed by them. So, it's a Aunt Marianne's House LLC, basically, has been formed down there. Not that Michael Cohen did the work, because he doesn't do that stuff. Eric Trump, the president's son, signs an $11.2 million mortgage on a house next to Mar-a-Lago's beach club, the document shows. What's going on here? I'm not sure. Maybe, I don't know how old Marianne is. Maybe she's tired of going down there. Maybe it's just a tax thing, and she's just like, I'd like the president's, I'd like my brother's son's company to own it because they can dodge taxes on it, and then if they get caught, it's them, not me. But by arrangement, I get to stay and live in the house. It's next to the Mar-a-Lago club, so anything could be happening here. It could be like, let's incorporate this house. It's very large, it looks like, into the Mar-a-Lago compound, or let's tear it down and build a giant swimming pool in the shape of a Playboy Playmate or something like that for some added class over at Mar-a-Lago. It could be anything. It could be, I want the Secret Service to stay there. Marianne, you're out of here. She might think she's probably got an arrangement. I get to live here for the rest of my life, but I don't have to pay anything anymore, and I get the $11 million out of it. Or whatever, but they're eventually going to say, we're kicking you out, we hate you, because nobody matters but us. I don't know what they're going to do with this thing. But there you have it. The Palm Beach house, the caption on the photo says, just sold by federal appeals judge Marianne Barry, one of President Donald Trump's sisters. Oh, he has more than one sister. Faces about 194 feet of ocean front. Do you want to know the address? 1125 South Ocean Boulevard. Public record, Sold for $18.5 million, according to a deed recorded by the Palm Beach County Clerk's office. Thank you for the photo, Andy Frame. What a great name for a photographer. And here's the story. Oh, it's got an update. Eric and Donald Trump Jr., President Trump's sons, are officers of the company that just paid $11.25 million for the Palm Beach oceanfront vacation home of one of the president's sisters. The house, we told you the address, sold by their aunt, federal appeals judge Marianne Trump Barry. According to the deed recorded this week, Eric, signed the $11.2 million mortgage. So they paid, $7 million in cash? Mortgage anyway for $11.2 million as president of what they call it. I told you they were going to call it Aunt Marianne's House LLC. No, they are the officers of. I told you how this works. You're not going to be surprised. 1125 South Ocean LLC. I told you. They make it very obvious, and they're not particularly creative. So what's the address of the house? 1125 South Ocean. What's the name of the company? 1125 South Ocean LLC. Literally, if not legitimately, a company formed for the exclusive purpose of buying this freaking house for whatever reason, which, again, goes back to how stupid is Michael Cohen to mix the purposes of Essential Consultants, LLC? And the answer is very effing stupid. Thank you. Donald Trump, by the way, Donald Trump Jr., is listed in business records as vice president of that limited liability company, which is registered in Delaware because the house is in Florida. Where else are you going to register your LLC? The lender named on the 30-year mortgage dated Thursday is Professional Bank, which doesn't sound suspect at all. Is Russian Bank is the name of the bank. I mean, I don't know. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Who cares? It'll become a big deal in due time, no doubt. The deed shows Barry sold the house as trustee of a revocable trust in her name. So that's interesting, too. So she didn't even own the house before this. A revocable trust in her name owned the house. Nobody owns their own goddamn house then. And nobody owns an $11.2 or $18.25 million house. Companies that have their names or revocable trusts in their name own those houses. There are no humans there. The deed shows that she owned it sold it as trustee. Her address is listed as an apartment on Fifth Avenue in New York City. Does she live in Trump Tower or not? The identity of the buyer had not been immediately available in the court records on Thursday, but guess what? It popped up here. The original story only noted that Judge Barry, one of Trump's sisters, sold for more than $18 million her oceanfront home in Palm Beach. The 8-bedroom West Indies-style house is immediately north of the beach club at Mar-a-Lago, the president's winter White House, they helpfully publicize it as. He loves that. The buyer wasn't identified. It turned out to be her nephew's through an LLC. There's a picture here, undated photo showing Judge Barry seated to the left of her sister, Elizabeth Trump Grau, about whom I know nothing. It's just very interesting. They've led a relatively anonymous life. How you doing, Elizabeth? Are you embarrassed by this or do you love it? Ivana Trump also in the picture there. Not Ivanka, Ivana. So it's an older picture, I guess. Real estate broker Christian Angle of Christian Angle Real Estate. He takes the Christian angle on everything. Has updated his sales listing showing the sale closed Wednesday. Angle handled both sides of the transaction. Nice and quiet. Built in 1956, the 2-story house occupies a half-acre lot immediately east of the coastal road. And immediately north of Mar-a-Lago. Unlike many other homes in that part of the estate section, the house stands directly on the beach. With about 194 feet of ocean front, the layout has 10,455 square feet of living space inside and out. Barry bought the house in 2004 for a recorded $11.5 million. Property records show. In 2014, she transferred ownership to her revocable trust. What a sneak. It's okay. The house is in the estate section, whatever that means. People who down there know what that means, homeowners association, I guess, is the idea here. And stands in the area that is closed to through traffic when the president visits Mar-a-Lago. Super valuable piece of real estate because of that, I guess. Other members of the president's family have bought property in the neighborhood, including his other sister, Elizabeth Trump Grau, who has a house on Woodbridge Road, immediately north of Mar-a-Lago. But that's where so they all live in a strip down there. They own that whole section, I guess. Barry is an attorney and an inactive senior circuit judge in the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Third Circuit. Yay, got it right. The court is based in Philadelphia and serves Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Delaware, ding ding, and the Virgin Islands. Angle represented Barry and listed the house for sale in early December. It was priced at $23.9 million when it sold, up $1 million from its initial asking price. What? So it was priced at $23.9 million when it sold, but I thought it sold for $18 million and up $1 million from its initial asking price. That's very hard to reconcile. I'll ponder it over the weekend. Angle's listing described its commanding in the sand ocean views, and that is very unusual. I don't think they would allow you to build that close to the ocean anymore, so interesting. Layout includes a formal living room, a sunroom, a family room, and a library. On the east side of the house, a balcony overlooks the ocean, a patio area, and the swimming pool, and I'm sure it's really nice. Photos show rooms with expansive glass windows capturing wide sea views in many of the other rooms. The house landed under contract in late March, according to the MLS, which I don't know what it is. In addition to Mar-a-Lago, the president maintains two smaller houses in the same area. One is on the corner of Woodbridge Road, where his other sister lives, at 1094 South Ocean Boulevard, next door to Mar-a-Lago. Not surprising. The other is adjacent lot at 124 Woodbridge Road. Trump transferred ownership of those properties from his name into corporate entities via deeds recorded a couple weeks after his inauguration in December of 2017. Those things that are important to him, really, truly important, he divested of. Trump once owned another house, by the way, at 152 Woodbridge Road, a couple of lots west of his current holdings there. He sold that to Barry in 2002 for $1.7 million, courthouse records show. She and her son, David Desmond, I guess we ought to track all the names here, combined that property with a lot next door, raised the two houses there, and built the new residence, which Desmond occupies with his wife, Lisa. More for the Rogues Gallery. The Desmonds sold that property in 2015 as 160 Woodbridge Road for $8.9 million. Trump once also co-owned Grau's house with her Although he transferred its ownership solely to her in 2007, she owns it through a revocable trust. Again, no human beings down there. Only bad things will come of this, I am sure, but let's keep an eye on these developments and see just how cruel Donald Trump is to his sisters as he realizes the value of the land that he allows them to sit on and accrue value on only because of his good name, you know. They owe him every bit of profit they make on those houses, I'm sure, in his mind. Okay, time to hand things over to Justice Putnam for the Friday West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Let's see what he's got on tap and what we can squeeze in here. The Trump administration's lies to citizens, public officials, and corporations about migrant kids they are disappearing are echoes of authoritarian fascistic mechanisms. And you knew that. What else have we got? Something going on in the tiny North Dakota town of Lathe. We'll tell you about it after this.
From Daily Kos Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
So what's going on up in North Dakota besides the people protesting my mispronunciation of their town? They've set a vote to dissolve rather than allow white supremacists to take it over. And a racist vigilante blocks a black doctor from entering the gated community she has lived in for over 8 years and then calls the cops when she doesn't comply. Next.